Yeah. I do that.
I actually, when I worked there for summer, like, thought I looked like Tom Cruise. It's like, right?
I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. Glasses, you definitely look like Tom Cruise.
What is that?
Girls, can you look over here?
Shit.
I said girls.
Take my
Hi.
Lucas?
I can put it on my own.
I was about to tell you that.
चारों बात कर रहे हैं ना
Just like Tom Cruise or something. Oh, right. No, I make cocktails and
You should tell everybody that you're Tom Cruise's son. Yeah. See if you can get away with it.
No, I was just joking. It was like, Thank you.
Hurry, check, hurry.
Oh, no, that's it. Individual
Yeah, I just regularly hiding. I'll probably end up going with that.
Yeah. So yeah, people.
I'm cool with that one, I'm not allowed to
add like oregano, put it
Good morning, all of you. Good morning to you also. Good morning. It's really a wonderful morning to be with you all today at this time. I will request Dr. Suraj Singh to please come and express his best wishes to you all. Dr. Suraj Singh.
Waiting, and we thought, oh, after coming to India, they had lost the sense of punctuality. And to my utter pleasure, when I just peeked in, I saw all of you are already there. So, well, before we start, may I invite you, all of you, for a cup of tea out there, and then we assemble again.
Within 20 minutes we'll be back.
Within 20 minutes we will be back. After the
We'll be having.
You can leave your stuff here.
Yeah, we can leave that stuff, yeah.
डॉक्टर साहब इधर से डॉक्टर साहब इधर ही नहीं थोड़ा सा इधर कर देना कैमरा यहाँ से एक सेकंड
We just saw the 11th statue.
Yes, Mahatma Gandhi. Independence struggle, yeah.
The temple,
Sixth temple.
Sikh temple, Gurdwara? Yeah. No. You will see a different house. There we have a lot of historical places. Have you seen Qutub Minar? Tallest, tallest
I really like the New Year's Day, but remember, I don't know anything about
That's why I asked you what you use. Because I find that software is a problem with students blocking or blocking.
I see numerous people even at a very senior level when they were when in fact you're not
California is more beautiful.
California is always like 70 Fahrenheit. So it's always nice in California.
This year I went, last year I went to Los Angeles, San Francisco. These are very different.
Yes. Because you have very cold breaking news.
That's right.
So they say, I guess they say temperate because the average.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
As a tradition, we welcome all of you. And to start the program, I would request Dr. Suraj Singh ji to give a welcome bouquet to Professor Vishal Gupta. May I speak, request Dr. Suraj Singh ji to give a bouquet? Vishal is coming.
Vishal ji, welcome to India.
या थोड़ा सा
I don't know whether you have a copy of this or not.
Mr. Brijesh Kumar Singh, the associate, who's associate with Dr. Suraj Singh ji, to give a welcome bouquet to Dr. Surendra Sahani ji. Dr. Surendra Sahani.
Dr. Susan Kahai.
Sahai. Dr. Surendra Sahai.
हाँ जी
And I'll request Mr. Sumit Jidani to give a welcome bouquet to Ms. Amanda Belair. And I'll also take the opportunity to welcome Samantha and Benjamin. Samantha and Benjamin.
They are being welcomed on behalf of all students. So, as
On behalf of all of you.
हाँ जी
Thank you very much. Again, I request Professor Vishal Gupta ji to speak a few words before we start this session today.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here today, and when I first was given a copy of the book that we just saw, and I started reading it, I came across a chapter written by Dr. Suraj Singh, and I started reading it, and I thought, this is interesting stuff. And I thought, oh, this, how do I share that with my students? And then I thought, well, how about we reach out to him and see if he would be willing to talk to our students? And when you reach out to people, some people agree and some, don't. And it's always kind of a hit and miss. But Dr. Suraj Singh was very gracious to accept our invitation and agree to speak to all of you. Now, you've all seen Delhi traffic, right? So, I mean, a speaking engagement in Delhi is not a short affair. Like, if you incorporate time taken to get to a place and then time taken to go back to one's office, it can be half a day worth of, work pretty much. So it's a lot of commitment to speak to a group. So please give him a warm applause for his willingness. I asked him to speak on two topics. One was, as I mentioned to you earlier, Dr. Singh was a colleague of President Obama before he was president, before he was senator, before he was a community activist, when he was a law student at Harvard. So I asked him to kind of share his personal recollections of how Obama was as a student and what their interaction was like. And second, I asked him to share with you his take on the pros and cons of the legal system in India and in the US. And as you know, no system is perfect. Neither is the Indian system nor is the US system perfect. And I wanted you to kind of hear his take on the legal system of the two countries. With that, I will pass it on to him, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Just to give you a brief, I'm sure you all have gone through this, Dr. Suraj Singh's, what he has done so far. Just to give you a little brief, but before that, I'll request one of you to keep your mobile phone on silent mode. Thank you very much. A very happy new year to all of you, and also I take this opportunity to welcome you to today's session. Let me speak to you about Dr. Suraj Singh. Mr. Singh is Harvard and Oxford educated top lawyer of India. He practices at Supreme Court of India
and Delhi High Court. For your knowledge, he is also an international lawyer. With his 3 master's degree and his Doctor of Laws from Harvard, he is arguably the highest educated lawyer of India. I am sure you will be happy to know that he happens to be the contemporary of American President Mr. Barack Obama, as just now spoken to you by Vishalji, at Harvard Law School during 1988 and 1990. I request Dr. Suraj Singh now to come on to the stage to express his views on today's topic. Dr. Suraj Singh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jaideep. Thank you, Vishalji. Ladies and gentlemen. Well, when somebody says that I had triple LLM, let me clarify, it is not that I flunked thrice, you know. It was from Delhi, Oxford and Harvard, and of course, Doctor of Law from Harvard. Well, when also people say that he studied at Harvard with Obama, I am quite happy. I only wonder whether Barack is as happy as me, being my classmate. It's rather contemporary. I was 1 year senior to him, in fact. I was doing my Doctor of Law, what they call SJD. It is after Masters. And he was doing his basic degree of law, what we call JD, Juris Doctor. In fact, Michel also came at the same time, 2-3 years earlier, from 85 to 88. I was there, but you know, we Indians are racist, so I was more after blondes rather than, you know. So I missed that great opportunity of knowing Michel better. In fact, in the first interaction when Barack Obama met me at Harkness Commons, which is a beer bar, he said, Suraj, I have spent 4 years, so from 84 to 88. So he said, Suraj, what do you like about America? And now, pardon me if anybody gets offended. I said, it's a young, beautiful blondes. So he said, you should not think you have a monopoly of such interest. I share your honorable interest. So we drank to American blondes at that time. Of course, he betrayed the trust and left to the other side. And I asked him that, look, you were not loyal to blondes. He said, Suraj, Michel is just unbelievable. I said, well, I believe in scientific temper. Should I verify that? Well, we left at that. That was before he became senator or president. Now, coming back to the topic, 2 topics are here. One is paradigm of leadership of Barack Obama and its implications for India. And then, of course, second is about comparative legal systems of India, US. I taught comparative constitutions of US, UK and India at Oxford, England. So, you know, when I used to ask American students that, do Americans enjoy more meaningful freedom than British do? And most of American students from Stanford University will say, yes, of course. I said, on what basis? And they would say, well, we have a written constitution. Well, England does not have a written constitution. But if you go by written constitution, then in the American constitution is very thin, whereas the Indian constitution is that big. So by that standard, Indians should enjoy even more freedom, meaningful freedom, than Americans. But that's not the case. Law on paper and law on real life is very different. When I went to Harvard, there was hardly any rule book, a little one. When I went to Oxford, they gave me this 200 pages rule book, including saying, should you intend to entertain a lady, bring her before dusk. And make sure she does not stay up to dawn. But if there is a necessity, the warden will tell you the way. So that's the English system. Like, laws are there on paper, but seldom really enforced. Coming back to the topic, what impressed me about Barack was, first of all, even then, in 88, he has much more global-centric vision as opposed to only American-centric vision. Most of Americans thought that the globe starts from East Coast and ends at West Coast. So 50 states are the only countries on the face of Earth. You know, rest of them are either, other planet. Barack was quite aware that apart from America, there are sensible people living. and they are also affected by the decisions made in America. So first thing was his global-centric view. For example, in various seminars he would ask, what is the impact of this outside America? Whereas most of Americans will not even bother about that. So that global, and that is because of his childhood, because of his background also. Born in Hawaii, brought up in Indonesia for a little while, then Europe. So all those. So global-centric perspective, that is international view on things, that was his first thing, and that's why he reached out to international students like me. He took initiative to make sure that he meets people outside America, and he was able to relate to them in a meaningful manner also. In terms of food, in terms of other things, like he was very fond of Indian dal. And when I went for the first inaugural in January 2009, and somebody asked me at some food festival, so I said, look, he is very fond of Indian dal. As long as there is enough supply of Indian dal in White House, you need not to worry about foreign policy. But if you think he's making mistake, send some more Indian dal to him and everything will be all right. So truly international, truly global. That was one perspective. Another one was thinking about, agonizing about different aspects of the thing. Say, for example, abortion. In America, many people have very, very stereotyped views of one way or the other. Personally, I am pro-choice. Personally, I believe that it's a sufficiently agonizing experience for a lady or men or both to decide whether to abort or not. Now, putting government or police behind that in this decision makes the thing difficult. So I am pro-choice, as they call it. But some people think differently. Some people think it's pro-life is as important, life is sacrosanct. And if life is sacrosanct, it can't be destroyed. You can't take away the life, so you can't give the life, you can't take away the life. Barack was able to see both sides and the complex decision which are to be made. Not an easy answer. Oh, how can we so stupid not to see pro-choice? Or other side also. That how can we so immoral not to see pro-life? You know, so these easy answer, either or, black or white. Instead of that, he would go for more complex understanding of the things. That was another aspect of the thing. That's why he was elected president of Harvard Law Review, which is a great honor, in which 75 editors, which are the top of the class, elect a president. So it means you have to convince both wings. At my time, Harvard Law School was divided into two main groups. One was conservative group, much more corporate kind of group, like Dean Clark, and other critical legal studies, which was a little bit leftist critique of law. And he was able to convince both and find a consensus. That's why he got elected. So another thing is looking for consensus, looking for some ways where shared values, important values can be discovered and a working coalition can be made around those. So that was another one. At personal level, there were 5 qualities which he exhibited then and which he exhibited even in election, and they are, and I would like you to take note of those, because these 5 qualities are very, very important. If out of this talk, if you get nothing except those 5 traits, then talk is meaningful. One is, he had a faith in himself and decency, faith in decency of others. Very important. Faith in self and faith in decency of others, American people. Like basically his view of the world is, people are decent, people are nice. They are not black or white. There are decent people out there, and that innate goodness is there, which can be invoked. And that's why he became the president. If there is a single secret how he became the president of America despite his black background, is because he believed in decency of Americans. And Americans proved him right. That yes, if you trust them, even American can be decent. Right? So, faith in self and faith in decency of others. That's why he went to Arab countries also, believing that yes, Arabs can be even sensible, provided they are given the right kind of leadership. So, now is faith in self and faith in decency of others. That's first thing. Second thing, looking for excellence. looking for best thing in life, wherever. Now, it's easier said. Everybody does not look for great things. Most of the people in the world are close-minded. You know, whatever values they have got, they never question them. Take America. George W. Bush came to India. In his small talk of half an hour, I was invited. I was president of Harvard Club of India at that time. He used the word liberty 17 times before we discovered that liberate us from your speech. 17 times liberty without understanding any of it. So, second thing is looking for excellence. Learning. And most important thing after 20 years of practice in Supreme Court I have discovered, it's easy to find learned people. It's very difficult to find those who have the genuine desire for learning. Learnability is the most important quality. Learnability, not learning. Because learning keeps on changing. Now in today's Google's world, you can discover anything. All learning is there. But learnability. So keep your minding open. Where you say that yes, this is my view, but I may be wrong. Right? This is the way I think, but there are other ways to look about it. So second is looking for excellence, that is learning. Third is character to execute the things. Once you have discovered a thing, now you have to execute it. And as Obama learned in a difficult, hard way, after first term, that these truths may be self-evident, that we are born equal and free in the pursuit of life, liberty and pursuit of happiness. But self-evident does not mean self-executing. Self-evident does not mean self-executing. They are to be executed. A lot of efforts are needed to execute them. Right? So, execution. It means having the character when difficult time comes to make sure that they are, you don't give up. Because temporary setbacks are bound to come. Barack Obama lost election in 2000, all of you know, as a House of Representative Congress. And even Michelle said that, look, I have 2 kids, these daughters, you have to take care of things, forget about this politics and all that, and start doing some serious business like making money. And he said, give me one chance, either up or out. And rest is history. So, execution. That's the third thing. Fourth thing is monitoring till you achieve it. Some people start the thing, but they don't achieve it. So achievement, that's the fourth thing. That monitoring it till you achieve it. And once you have achieved it, then you want to make a contribution towards others. So the fifth one is contribution. So I repeat, first is faith in self and in decency of others. Second, looking for excellence or learning. Third, execution despite temporary defeats. Fourth, achievement, monitoring the things till you really achieve it and celebrating it. And fifth, contribution, making difference in the lives of other people once you know it. Now, in one sentence I can say his entire secret can be decoded in one sentence, and that is discovering your own greatness, discovering your own greatness and helping others in discovering theirs. I repeat, discovering your own greatness and helping others in discovering theirs. So 2 parts of it, discovering your own greatness and helping others in discovering theirs. Now there are 2 parts of it. How do you discover your own greatness? That is by learning and doing. So the first formula is you learn, you do, that's the way you discover. So learning and doing. And then how do you help others in discovering theirs? That I will say teach. So if you want a formula, it's learn, do and teach. So first you master a thing, like as a Supreme Court lawyer, what I do? First I learned what it takes to be an effective lawyer before the Supreme Court. Now these 2 associates who are with me, and there are many more, I have trained about 80 so far, including one Chinese young lady last year who did a research on human rights between India and China and came to a very interesting conclusion between India and China. She says, in India, we talk about human rights, but in China, we really enjoy it. Well, very interesting. So she says, in India, we talk about human rights. In China, we really enjoy it. I don't know what is her level of enjoyment quotient, but that's the way she concluded. But very interesting perspective. Her premise was that we should, like having a good life, that means basic necessities of life, is much more part of fundamental right than ability to speak in public or criticize the government. So her thesis was, Chinese may not be able to criticize their government, but they are much more having better standards of living day-to-day life. There is less poverty, so that's why they enjoy more human rights. So, learn to and teach. So that is Vadahdin's formula. Now we apply to Indian context. Then of course, how these things, like 4 qualities which Obama has exhibited, 5 qualities I mentioned. In Indian context, we would say a person who has a clear vision of India. So first requirement is clear vision. Where India is and where you want to take it. So having a clarity of that is very important. You can't pretend that on the one hand, we have 250 million people which are almost equal to American population in middle class, whereas we have 700 million people which are almost, poor. So those realities are to be faced. So, clear vision, where India is and where you want to take it. Second, a sense of judgment, prioritization, priorities. What are the, if you have limited energy, what are the 3 most important things you will do? And in what order? So, prioritization, that is the second quality. Third, of course, is execution, that how you execute it. And the character to execute it, because sometimes taking a decision against public opinion may not be easy. And fourth is connectivity with people. It's a democracy. So unless you are able to connect, it's not a dictatorship. Unless you are able to connect with people, you can't implement it. So clear vision, prioritization, execution, and connectivity with people. These 4 qualities are required to be a person like Obama in India. And question is, who that leader who represents? In my article I have said so, I'll not go on that. So, these are the few thoughts I thought, and now I open it for discussion, because idea was to have much more meaningful discussion than this. So, now about the legal system, I can say a few things in question and answer session. One line I will say about the legal system is that in India, we borrowed the system from England, and few portion we borrowed from America also. Like for example, common law we borrowed from England, and constitution, written constitution, is pretty much we borrowed from America. Direct principle from Ireland. So Indian constitution is not really an organic whole, it's like mixture from here and there. But during its implementation by the Supreme Court in 60 years, my book is coming interestingly, the title is Judging the Judgments of Indian Supreme Court. The title is Judging the Judgments of Indian Supreme Court, How Wise, How Otherwise. Right? How wise, how otherwise. Because in India we do not have the tradition like America where you critically appreciate the judgments of Supreme Court. So in that book I try to do that by showing that to what extent these judgments have been meaningful and to what extent they have not been. Now, like for example, recently, as you might have seen, Supreme Court has come out with very good judgments. But recently on gay, on homosexual, lesbian judgment, Supreme Court has really failed to understand the evolving trends in India and said homosexuality is illegal. Now again, like abortion, my stand is, I may not be fond of homo, I'm too fond of opposite sex to be homo, but that is my own choice. If somebody feels different, then choice should be left to him, rather police telling him what to do or what to not to do. Because in India, once you make something illegal, it means giving more power to the police. And unfortunately, Indian police is not very much respectful of dignity and fundamental rights and the standards of, universal standards of fundamental rights. So as a result of that, once you make something illegal, then what happens? That means giving more power to the police, which is not a healthy thing, right? So that's why I oppose Supreme Court decision of homosexuality. In fact, I was on All India Radio, which is our national radio. I go on TV and radio quite often. Whenever there is anything important, they ask to give opinion and all that. So I opposed it. That was definitely a wrong judgment. And now a review petition has been filed. And Parliament will also change the law. So with these preliminary remarks, let's start with a question, observation, anything.
Okay, guys?
Yeah, I'll request all of you, if you have some questions to ask, please feel free to ask the questions to Professor.
First say your name.
Say your name and your
Subjects you are
department.
studying, and then ask the question.
So what's
Thank
your
you.
major, your name, your major, and then you ask the question. Go
Yes,
ahead.
please.
Hi, I'm Kia Zavari, and my major is mechanical engineering. The question I would like to ask you today is, you've been educated in both America and India and England, so what differences have you seen in the education system?
That's a very good question. Well, first of all, see, India. In India, the emphasis is much more cramming, like memorization. Like when I did my law from Delhi, it was much more what Supreme Court said in this. So judgments are already there, you study. So in the class, you just reproduce. Like I was topper of the class, summa cum laude or whatever you call it, like first, very first. And what is the secret? I gave back in examination what teacher taught me. My memory was good, so it was a test of memory. It was no test of judgment, it was no test of thinking. So from Delhi, and Delhi is one of the top universities. So Delhi Law Faculty, I did my basic law degree. When I went to Harvard, I took a course called Legal History by Morton Horowitz. So it was an open house test. I got B plus in that. I wasn't happy because I was throughout topper and all. I thought I should be getting A. So I asked Morton, I got B plus in your paper, so what is wrong? Why did I get A? Well, he was a good professor, very close to me. He said, oh, I'm glad you did not flunk. So, you passed. He said, no, seriously, you used to ask a lot of questions in the class, so I was expecting better grades for you. So, better you come on Monday. So, that was Friday. So, on Monday I go, the secretary Nancy is waiting there. Morton is waiting for you, and he has spread all the answer sheets in front of him. He picks out mine and said, read it. And then he gives me 2 or 3 A plus answers. And I discover that what they said was not different than what I thought. But because in India, whenever I differed with a professor, I was penalized, right? So I didn't want to take chances in America. Suppose if I flunk, they will send me back. I want to stay for doctorate also. So I played safe. I really gave whatever professor has taught in the class and his book. I read his book, Transformation of American Law. I read his articles. So Morton said, look, in your paper, you have given me back what I have taught in the class or in my book or articles. So that shows you are hardworking. You have written it well, so it means your memory is good. And third, that by international standards your English is all right. So B plus is okay. If you like, I can reduce it to B minus or whatever you say. But the difference of A plus was that a lot of ideas which I thought where Professor Horowitz have missed the point, I did not have the courage to mention in the answer book. Whereas those A plus students, they have said, Professor, Morton Horowitz in his book, American Transformation of Law, has taken away this. How about this assumption? This is based on this assumption, this is based on this. How about, has he considered the alternative this? Has he considered this? Have you considered this? So there was this engagement of mind with the issue. Whereas in my case, I was giving very hackneyed answers, which were there in the book. So the first, after that I never got anything less than A, by the way. So I'm a good student. Right. But the secret was that they teach at Harvard, they teach how to think. Same thing at Oxford. In tutorial, if you write the essay, and pretty much what professor said, he said, look, I don't want to hear my views. I want to hear yours. So Oxford, Harvard had that thing that where they make you think. But there's a difference between Harvard and Oxford also. If I were to choose being an Indian, only one university, I'll go to America, Harvard, Stanford, Yale. If I can afford both, then I'll go to Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, whatever. Reason is that India has adopted so much from England that many things, same biases, same prejudices, class system, for example, right? But I like that certain, Oxford was much more, in a sense, extended vacation, like your professor drinks with you, high table, all witty conversation. One of my professors, she was French lady, beautiful lady. After the dinner and after a few drinks, she said, Surat, how do you find Oxford? No, please don't get offended. I said, like your legs, stimulating but not satisfying. and Oxford professor enjoy that kind of bit. In India I would be beaten up or thrown out of, harassment or whatever. So like that. So excellent experience, but the difference between Indian system, there is much more difference between Indian system on the one hand and American England is pretty much the same, though I would say for undergraduate, Oxford, Cambridge are still the best, but for higher professional degrees, America has taken over. Because their tutorial system is something which America has not till so far been able to replicate. Tutorial system is when one or two students, just one-to-one basis, every week, thrice a week, you sit with your professor, you can consult any book, and then you have to write an essay, and professor will go line by line, that why you say so, why you have put it this way, why not different way. So you are really made to think through the things. So that's an excellent method. And then of course, you have got similarities like you have so many clubs. I was member of Oxford Debating Society, which was quite an experience. One of the topic was, this house believes in drinking rather than thinking. And I was supposed to defend that. Yeah.
There was a question there.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Raise your hand and tell your name. Yeah.
Surinder.
Surinder.
Yeah. I've watched several presidents of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So I've watched several presidents of the United States of America.
Yes.
And I felt that when President Obama was elected, I thought that he will be like President Clinton by way of being able to connect with the masses. He's a great orator, but I felt that he has not been able to connect with the masses the way President Clinton was able to. President Clinton could make you cry, for instance. What has your personal observation been?
Well, Surinder, this question again is very perceptive. Only last week, a professor of Chicago came here. So I was talking to him, I asked him, how will you rate President Obama? 3 choices, great, good, average. He said, almost great. I said, why qualify almost great? He said something very interesting what you are saying. And then I noticed, earlier I was not able to see that distinction. He said, President Obama is a great speaker, but he is a poor communicator. Now, whereas Bill Clinton is a great communicator. Example. How many of you have watched Democratic National Convention of 2002 when Bill Clinton introduces nomination of President Obama second time? DNC, Democratic National Convention of 2012.
Their average age is about 20, 21, so 2002 they were like 10.
2012, sorry, 2012. Sorry, 2012, 2 years ago, second time.
Yeah, yes, Andrew saw that.
See, they are the Bill Clinton. So, interesting, I watched it. It's about 49 minutes thing, it's worth watching. Being a lawyer, I will ask every junior of mine to watch it. What he does is, what we will call explainer in chief. He explains the achievements of Obama, which Obama was not able to explain himself. And he connects with people. And there he says that what Obama inherited was such a difficult economy that nobody, no presidents, including me, could have done better. And then he explains how. So the thing is, and he is able to connect with people. The problem with Barack Obama is that at individual level he thinks a lot. He's a very profound thinker also. But he is more professorial rather than connecting. Whereas Bill Clinton is more politician, like Ronald Reagan, connecting with people. See, the difference is this. I'll say Ghalib is a great poet of India. So he has said something about communication. First I'll say in original, then I'll translate. अपना कहा गर आप ही समझे तो क्या समझे, अपना कहा गर आप ही समझे तो क्या समझे, मजा कहने का तब है एक कहे और दूसरा समझे. Surinder, could you get it?
Yes.
Yes. Meaning thereby that if you say something and only you understand and other person, the targeted audience does not understand, it's meaningless. The real fun is that when you say something and it gets landed on the other side, other person understands it, right? Bill Clinton is like that. He is able to carry his message through in a connecting way. He is pretty much that I am one of you. Whereas Barack Obama sometimes get very much closed emotionally, psychologically. In fact, people think that he is, because he has won 2 elections, he is very people-oriented. Personally, he is a very aloof kind of person. He is very warm inside. He is very good at heart. But one-to-one basis, sometimes you would be wondering, is he your friend? Because emotionally, he was not very close to his father. His father was absent from his life. So he was close to his mother. But then this kind of a equation is there where he thinks very profoundly, but sometimes he is on one-to-one basis, he is not able to emotionally connect much. So that problem is there. And that's precisely what this professor of Chicago said, almost great. Because in that communication, had Bill Clinton not explained the achievements of Obama, probably it was a very tough election. That's why people say that a speech that made the difference. So it's very important that you are able, and that's why I said faith in yourself, and last one I said connectivity. Connectivity with people is very important. Supposing I have 1,000 ideas in my head, and if I am not able to communicate it to you, to your level, if I am not able to see where you are at, I will not be able to connect. It would be much more a Shakespeare's soliloquy, the hero talking to himself. Right? So that difference is there. But as Bill Clinton says, and I quote him, that he is a person who is cool from outside but burns from inside for America. So on the whole, Barack Obama is a great president for America.
Thank you very much for a wonderful answer.
Hi, my name is Kanika.
Where are you?
Over here.
Yeah.
My name is Kanika Suarez, and I'm an English major, and I'm going through the pre-law track.
Right.
And I have a question for you.
Yes, sure.
I'd just like to know, when did you figure out that law was for you? Like, how did you know that was your passion?
Well, I was always interested in public life, and I noticed that all the leaders, including Abraham Lincoln, including Bill Clinton, Barack Obama now, Mahatma Gandhi of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, first Prime Minister of India, Sardar Patel, another leader, even maker of Pakistan, Jinnah, all were lawyers invariably. So I thought it will give me a lot of freedom. I was good in maths, so I had 2 choices. It is not that since I was poor with numbers, so that's why I chose law, as many people do. I could have gone for MBA. Incidentally for me, I was throughout topper type student, so any discipline I could have gone. But in debates and all that, I discovered that it's more, congenial to my taste and temperament. So it's a subjective decision. What you like to do without paying, that's the test. Supposing nobody pays you. Like for example, I enjoy giving talk, I enjoy teaching. If nobody pays me anything, I'm quite okay with that, because it gives me satisfaction. So It depends. So keep your options open. Don't narrow it down too early, because life may throw so many surprises. There might be much more opportunities than you think. So in a sense, be firm in something, choose some area where you feel good, and then keep on working at it. And then at the right moment you will be choosing. And you are in America. America means a lot of choices. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
He has a question.
The lady over there after that. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, my name is Samantha Eilenberg, and I'm going for my master's in business administration.
Right.
And my question is that you said in your chapter that there are a bunch of different leaders in India who
Right.
have the potential to be the next Obama for India, but they're lacking, one or two of those important qualities. So
Right.
I was just wondering, of those leaders, which do you think has the most potential to achieve all of the qualities?
Well, in fact, my chapter is a little bit dated, because at that time the new leader which has emerged, that is Arvind Kejriwal, he was agitating. He was not a leader. He did not, when I wrote this chapter. Right now, the new emerging leader, which I have not analyzed, is Arvind Kejriwal. He was agitating in Gandhi style, and now he has become the chief minister, youngest chief minister of Delhi, and he is going for national politics. He believes in empowering the people, much more like Obama. Of course, he is not as experienced. Of course, he is not as bright as Obama. But for India, giving power back to people is very important. People should feel empowered instead of government everywhere. Like, for example, he has banned use of red lights. Red lights, the red beacon on the car, which indicates you are a very important person. So he has asked his minister not to use that, so that they are much more, people feel more relating to them. So that possibility is there. Rahul Gandhi I thought would do, but Rahul Gandhi, first of all, Rahul Gandhi was my junior at Harvard. Even he did not complete his degree. So he does not have a track record of success. Right? Then he is surrounded by wrong kind of advisors, like all those. So all those people are not very connected to public. Then you have to be open-minded in things. You have to learn. Quick learner is required. So a lot of factors are there. He is relying on Harvard, Oxford kind of advisor too much. He should also listen to those people who are rooted in the people, who are much more connect with people. So otherwise you will be having your kind of person, a person who is elite, cannot connect with people. So then, and it is the people who will vote for you. So that is there. But interesting things are happening in India. About corruption. Now Rahul Gandhi and others are saying we should stop it. So there is almost a consensus emerging that corruption must be stopped, which is a very good thing. So things are happening in India. As Bill Clinton said about America, I'll say about India. Bill Clinton said, what is right with America is much more than what is wrong with America. Same thing I'll say, what is right with India is much more than what is wrong with India. Thank you. Yeah. Raise your hand. Yeah. And tell your name. Yeah.
My name is Benjamin Friedlander. I'm an accounting major.
Right.
My question for you is, during your speech, you talked about discovering your greatness.
Yes.
We've gone through 5 qualities that
Yes.
have enabled President Obama to find his greatness.
Right.
And we've also discussed 4 strategies or thought processes that the next Indian leader will
Right.
need in order to enable India to find its greatness.
Right.
In your professional career,
Right.
you've been very successful in numerous high-profile cases and received many awards
Thank
recognizing
you. You are
that.
very kind. You are very kind.
So my question is, what advice would you give us as future leaders with regard to how we can find our own personal greatness?
Oh, very good. Excellent question. Benjamin, first thing is, everything starts with self-confidence, right? As Emerson, R.W. Emerson, fellow Harvardian, said in 1860s, in a famous essay called Self-Reliance, everybody of you should read it, an American scholar. These 2 essays, Self-Reliance and American Scholar, where he says that for Americans he was saying, our tutelage to Europe is over. Americans should think like Americans, right? So Fundamental, and he says that the best education is which bring you back to yourself, right? So self-trust is the most important. Self-trust means what? It's not self-delusion, it's not self-deception. It means that fundamentally you say that by the grace of God, I've been given these wonderful capabilities and some limitations. Everybody does, mixed bag. So by grace of God, I've been endowed with these wonderful qualities and of course limitations. So under these circumstances, how do I make the best of my gifts? Because today, in a cynical world, a lot of people emphasize on what is wrong with India, what is wrong with America, what is wrong with you, what is wrong with your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Instead of that, if you focus on, there was a famous course of positive psychology at Harvard. In fact, the most famous course, I don't know this year they are offering or not, 2-3 years ago, that was the most famous course called positive psychology. There, the basic thesis was this, that so far psychology in last 100 years has focused so much on the study of sickness rather than on the study of health and good life. And this is very important, that psychology in 100 years has become sick. Freud himself, Sigmund Freud, I call him a robust patient. He was sick himself, but he was robust. He discovered his sickness, tried to overcome it. Now, a shrink, recently I read a book, very interesting one, Shrink and Sage. Now, one should be sage, not the shrink. Now, sage is a person who can look at the reality, unflinching, straight, as Indian rishis, old seers could do. The whole universe, you know, without fear or favor. So now, self-trust is the first thing. That's the beginning. But then, if you trust yourself and nobody else, that's not good enough, then you will be arrogant, you will be narcissistic, you will be egoistic. So it's like, I am okay and you are okay. So second thing is trust in others. Because human beings are full of bundles of things. In fact, James Madison, who drafted American Constitution, Madison, he became president also. So Madison said something when he drafted American Constitution. He says, if all men were angels, sorry, at that time they were just using men, not women. And if all men were angels, there was no need of any constitutions, because angels don't need constitutions. On the other hand, if all men were devils, again no constitution, because devils will never respect a constitution, right? But because human beings are mixture of both angels and devils, so we have made this constitution to promote the virtue and to contain vices, right? So the purpose of law is to promote the virtue and to contain the vices. Human beings are flexible, human beings are plastic, human beings are capable of changing themselves. That's the most important quality of human beings. If you want what is the most human trait, it is changeability. That's the most important. Nothing is rigid. All this nonsense about libido, ego, superego, and all these are changing. Give a different kind of circumstantial structure and there will be a change. That's why Marx was so successful in something. But again, Marx made the same mistake. He made his own system very inflexible. In human beings, whether it's Freud or Marx or Adam Smith, the wonderful quality of human beings which Plato captured, and after that Spinoza. In fact, one single book I will ask you to read, all of you, which is the best book on ethics, is Ethics, E-T-H-I-C-S, Ethics by Spinoza, Benedict Spinoza. It was written in 1677. It has small, hardly 200 pages, 5 chapters, brilliant one. Number 1, Nature of God. That's the first chapter. Nature of God, first chapter. And the way he explains God, wonderful. After reading this, you will never remain the same person, whether you are religious or irreligious or whatever. So, first is nature of God. Second is nature of human thought. Third is nature of human emotions. Fourth is nature of human freedom. Fifth is nature of human bondage. Right? So, nature of God, nature of thought, nature of emotions, nature of human bondage, and nature of human freedom. Right? So there also he says, self-preservation is the most important quality of human beings. So everybody is guided by self-interest. But enlightened people are guided by enlightened self-interest. Now this is very important. It's an operative word, whether it's in business, in politics, in law. Enlightened self-interest. What does it mean? When Adam Smith in 1776 wrote an inquiry into wealth of nations, he said, from my experiences I have discovered that it's better to be guided by self-interest, and overall wealth would be much more than if you're guided by charity or some other notion, right? And by invisible hand, the whole society will be benefited. So he said this, but I go a step further, that self-interest fine, but if you are too self-interest, nothing will work out. In law, every day we see contract is possible when we worry about self-interest but interest of other person. So enlightened self-interest means, yes, I want something out of this deal, but I also want you to succeed. You can call it win-win situation if you like, that not only what is in it for me, it's a very narrow question. Yes, of course, what is in it for you is a primary motivation. But what is in it for you? For example, I am one of the highest paid lawyers in this country, making millions in fees. How do I do that? If I ask somebody, give me $1 million US for my fees, he will say, are you crazy or what? Oxford, Harvard is all right, but supposing if I say, all right, your property is worth $100 million. How much? $100 million. I'll save it. Today you are losing. Okay? How much do you think I deserve? Even a property dealer, real estate broker gets 2%. I'm a lawyer, Harvard, Oxford educated lawyer, right? 100 million property I save for you. How much do I deserve? Right? Then even ask $1 million is not much, right? So the trick is, first you should think of creating value for others, right? First you think what value you are creating for others. And make it possible. Once you do that, then say, now I've been fair to you, now you fair to me, right? So if I am making 100 million for you, then let's share, right? In one case which I am doing against Anil Ambani, which is one of the greatest capitalists of India, rich man, like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or whatever. 1,100 farmers are with me. Their land has been taken by the government at a throwaway price, like not even 10% of what their value is. So I am negotiating with Ambani that give fair price to these farmers, the case in the Supreme Court. And fair price would be about, how much? Maybe 1,000 crores, 1,000 crores means 200 million. So 200 million. And my understanding with these farmers is that if I get you 200 million, I should get 10% of that. That comes to 20 million, right? But they are getting 200, means 180 million they are getting, right? So the idea is that self-interest, but at the same time, interest of others. So self-trust, that's the first thing. Second, trust in others, that's the second thing. Fellowship, teamwork, because nobody can do great things alone. So teamwork is the next thing, ability to relate to people. And that's why all the 5 things which I said in Obama, those are the great qualities. That is self-trust and trust in others, decency of others, then willingness to learn, then this execution ability, then achievement, monitoring till you achieve it, and then sharing contribution. See, many people get confused. They, out of some moral thing or whatever, many people prematurely try to do good things for others, right? And that's self-defeating. When you ride an aeroplane, they say if the pressure of oxygen is low, then oxygen mask will come down. First put it on you, then on children. Why? Are they selfish? Are they stupid? No. They think that if you are able to save yourself, you will be able to save your children. But if you die yourself, children will also die, right? So the idea is protect yourself first. If you have to protect only one person, protect yourself. If you have to make only one person happy, secret is make yourself happy. Because a miserable person will make other people miserable also. We have so much misery in religion and in other things because we try to do good for others and we really neglect ourselves. No, take good care of yourself. Bhagavad Gita, the famous book of Hindus, has 700 verses. In childhood I read it all. In childhood I could recite the whole thing. Right? Now memory is not that good. But the entire secret I give you in one line. And that is 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, right? And that is, first, let me give you Sanskrit and then in English. Sapta satam slokeshu krishnasya vakyam dam. Sapta satam slokeshu krishnasya vakyam dam. Yoga hai karmashu kauslam prasanna chet se buddhi parivasishtiti. Yoga hai karmashu kauslam prasanna chet se buddhi parivasishtiti. So that's Sanskrit. Meaning thereby, out of 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna's real words are only 2. What are they? Because a lot of things have been added by Brahmins and others and pseudo-scholars and all that. What are they? Yoga karmashu kauslam. Do your duty effectively. So first thing, act well. So that's the first advice. Do your duty effectively. So duty effectively, not just doing it. So yoga karmashu kauslam. Doing your duty is yoga. Doing your duty is real yoga. Yoga means union with the highest. So that's one. And that's not enough. Second part is equally important. Prasanna chetse buddhi parevasisthiti. And when you are happy, when you are cheerful, you are closer to God. So do your duty effectively and cheerfully. Now, Spinoza has said the same thing. Act well and rejoice. That's the best possible advice I ever got. Act well and rejoice. People feel miserable as if there is a burden. No. Do your duty and just relax. Don't take over responsibility. Taking over responsibility is as bad as taking no responsibility. Right? So take adequate responsibility, do it well and relax. Right? Benjamin, is that okay? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, Dr. Singh.
Yes.
My name is Isaac Anthony, and I'm currently studying finance.
Okay.
So Benjamin alluded to it a little bit, but you've definitely worked some high-profile cases. Specifically, there was one in which you represented members of parliament regarding bribery.
Right.
So I just wanted to know, could you speak a little bit about how prevalent corruption is within the Indian political and legal systems, and some of the challenges you've faced in dealing with corruption?
Well, first of all, 2 things. One part is that I defended all these corrupt politicians successfully. Second is, when I was offered bribery myself of $10 million, I refused it. So don't get the impression that while defending these people, I became corrupt in the process. No. Well, what happened? Excuse me. That in 1993, Narasimha Rao, he was the Prime Minister. He was in a minority. Yeah. So, his minority status in the parliament was to be proved. He needed 14 members more. So, some of his ministers contacted other political parties which were kind of neutral, that look, you have to cast your vote anyway. Why don't you make some money in the process? So you vote for Narasimha Rao and we'll give you about $1 million deal. $1 million plus a petrol pump, which is another $1 million. So roughly speaking, you will get $2 million each. $2 million US dollars. That was in 1993. These people obliged and voted for Narasimha Rao, and his government survived for another 5 years. In certain sense, that was a big deal because any re-election in India cost millions and millions of dollars. So it costs 14 means how much? 2 million each, 28 million. Election expenses would have been 280 times, but that's a moral decision. That's a separate issue. So these people, when next government came into power in 97, opposition party, they discovered that these people have taken money, which is the corruption, and some of them deposit that money in a bank account. So it was easy to discover it. So then a corruption case was filed against them. 5 of them came to me. Now, as a lawyer and professional ethics, you have to decide whether you want to take a case or not. Say, for example, I do not take a case against in favor of a rapist. I don't, because I don't feel like defending a rapist, right? But supposing a person is quite innocent, in some cases it happens, and a person is falsely implicated, and from the record I can make up, then, in fact, I will also, defend that. In one of the case, I said, a rape is an affront against human dignity. A rape is an affront against woman's dignity. But a false case is an affront against human dignity, right? Because nobody should be falsely implicated, man or woman. So these people came. I thought, should I defend them or not? I felt I can defend them because there was some constitutional point. So we, as Supreme Court, 5 judges bench was constituted. So allegation was that these people sold their votes for money and hence they had committed corruption, right? So question was to prosecute them. I was defending them, and obviously my task was how to defend them within the parameters of law. Now, I argued that since we were member of parliament, if we do anything wrong, only parliament can take action against us. Because a member of parliament doing something wrong is a breach of privilege of parliament. All these members of parliament have certain privileges, right from English system, immunity if you call in America. So if we did something wrong, like selling our votes for money, parliament can take action against us, not the courts. And since in India, like America, we have a separation of power, there's a legislature, there's the executive, there's the judiciary, and all these three are separate and independent of each other. So legislature will not interfere with judiciary, judiciary will not interfere with legislature. So I argued before 5 judges that you should not interfere in parliamentary affairs, because Article 105 of the Constitution says, Constitution of India, no member of parliament can be prosecuted for anything said or vote given in parliament in any code of law. So I argued that any code of law means any code including Supreme Court. So with great respect, I told the judges, you might be tempted to take action against them, but you have no jurisdiction in the matter. You have no power, you have no authority, because there is a certain integrity of the Constitution. I said, like in human body, there is a head, there are arms, there are legs. If somebody's head is brilliant, but arms are not working or legs are not working, that will be called a handicapped person. Supposing we take Supreme Court as a head, legislative wing as legs, executive wing as arms. Supposing Supreme Court is only working in India, but other wings are not working, it would be called a handicapped polity. You don't want that. So I said, with great respect, you do not have jurisdiction in the matter. Now one of the judges, 5 judges, said, Dr. Singh, are you saying there is a fundamental right to take bribery in India? Now, in such situation you have to be very, quick and smart. So I said, yes, for member of parliament, not for judges. You remain honest and poor. Right? You should not be tempted, but member of parliament, yes. If they do something wrong, they would be defeated in next election. So it's a political control, not the legal control. You stay put where there you are, even you are tempted. And out of 5 judges, 3 judges interpreted that interpretation given by me. Well, that was in England from 1689 onwards. There's a parliamentary privilege, and the benefit of that was that next time, because corruption was not a one-time thing in India, next time when other members of parliament took some money, it was the parliament which took action. So action was taken, right? Not by courts, but by parliament. But in my time, my clients, at the time there was no law, so they were allowed to go free. So that happened. Now, when I was doing this case, then we filed a case against President of Congress, Sitaram Kesri, because he was the treasurer. Our argument was that because taking bribery and receiving bribery is offense, so if we have taken the bribery, somebody must have given, and that must be the President of Congress, the party. So I was offered a bribery of crores in 97. 50 crores means $10 million. $10 million US. Well, call me stupid, call me honest, call me crazy. I refused, right? So another time also I was offered when I was doing this environmental case against Chief Minister of some state. So that happened. So, so that is one-to-one basis level, right? Personally, Obviously, I'm not in favor of any corruption. Personally, if you make me the law minister, I'll beat the shit out of all these corrupt people because I know the loopholes. Right? But if I'm a defense lawyer, then I have to defend them. We defeated Attorney General of India. Has Attorney General of India been smarter? There were certain, arguments to counter my arguments, but he did not come out with those. But law was changed. So that's what we did. Any clarification on that, or is it clear?
No, it's definitely clear. But I was also curious, like, aside from that one case where you were offered bribery, were there any other instances where you had to deal with it?
Oh, in so many cases. I just gave one example. Another was, I did a public interest litigation in environment. 500,000, 500,000 trees were to be felled in Odisha for some foreign hotels and all that. So on environmental damage to environment, we filed a case with Supreme Court against the Chief Minister of that state. That was in '94. Like, I came back to from US and Oxford in '92. I started working with the Attorney General of India. Then in '93 I started my own practice. So within 1 year, '94, I was fairly new. We got a stay from the Supreme Court. So at the time, about $2 million bribery was offered. At the time there was debate because I was fresh from USA, not making much money. In the beginning, I do not. And many of my relatives were making a lot of money. So I was just wondering, should I go for it or not? So there was a debate in mind for 5 minutes, but then I decided not to take it. Second time it was easy, once you have made your mind. Obama used to say one thing very remarkable, and I want you to note that. That's very important. He says, once you know in life what you will not compromise, life is easy, because rest of the things you can be flexible. So once you know what not to compromise, then life is easy. So you must make sure what not to compromise. Means your priorities, your hierarchy of values should be clear. There was this famous French diplomat who wrote a book on America also, Working of American Democracy in 1860s. Anybody remember? Who that? Alex Tocqueville, right? Or Tocqueville, if you pronounce it in French way. So, Alex Tocqueville said, a diplomat should always be flexible. A diplomat should always be flexible. Unless he should be otherwise, then he should be unshakable. Right? Meaning that there are certain things about which no compromise whatsoever. For example, I'll never bribe a judge. Never means never. I never bribed any. I have won 80% of the cases, which is one of the highest, by the way, without bribing anyone. Right? So it is not that in India system does not work, but I do hear the stories where all kind of bargains are struck. So make sure what is priority for you, and according to that priority, you have to be true to yourself in that sense. Right? I am comfortable, like I would have got Mercedes in '94 had I taken the bribery. Today, by honest money, I have Mercedes and all that. So honest money, it gives you more satisfaction. So that's there. And honestly, we make tons of money. Honestly, we pay taxes. That's the only limitation, 30% tax. But if you pay 30% tax, the rest of money is yours. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi.
Yeah.
My name is Roxy, and I'm currently pursuing my degree in marketing and cinema.
Right.
As an international student, I'm very curious about, a lot of people who study abroad in countries like the US, the UK, after they're pursuing their degree, they kind of have a question in their head, should they stay in this country or should they come back to their home country? And so, given the fact that you got multiple degrees, like very degrees that considered as very high level in the US and the UK, you could have had that opportunity to stay there. So did you have that debate in your head back in the day, and why did you decide to come back home?
Well, good question. These days a lot of people ask. First of all, let me tell you, in '92 and 2013, first situation different, 2014. Today you don't have to choose between either or, right? Because in this internet world and all that, in '90 when I used to call India, it will take 1.5 hours to get the connection. Right now it's instant. In fact, I have an American number right here. So the world is different. You can have houses or offices or whatever at both places. So situation not as much either or. You can represent some great company over here in India or some Indian company over there. So debate is not as much either or. You can have both. And in fact, in 87 to 90, I was going out with this wonderful Kennedy lady in US. She wanted to marry and I also wanted to marry her, but at that moment I thought it would be difficult for her to adjust to India and Indian conditions. If today I was given the choice, I would have done that. Because in India, now after 91, liberalization, things have opened up. Like I have the same breakfast here, Kellogg's and all that, Raisin Bran, which I used to have there. Same champagne. Of course, another thing is here I have a chauffeur also. And cooks and all that. So like labor in India is relatively cheap. So same standard you can maintain. So that's not. Second thing is that you have to see where you get the opportunity. That's very important. Supposing if I was made professor of Harvard, I would have stayed there. The kind of jobs I was getting, law associate, you are at the bottom of the rung. I was SJD, doctor of law, and starting with simple LLBs, and pardon me, many Americans I found arrogant and ignorant, so that kind of combination. So I decided that I would be happier here, and I came here, and I don't regret that decision. Many American educated, England educated people are returning to India. India 20 years ago and now is very different. India is a growing economy. It's a tough place, but lot of opportunity. If you succeed here in a big way. And the fact that you have studied abroad puts you in a different category altogether. You are not in a below poverty line. So you would be in the elite. And elite here are really, having a lot of opportunities. So for you, the choice should be what will make you, see, whether in America, India, England, everywhere the question is same. Overall, and that's the question you should ask yourself, overall your, what I will call fulfillment quotient, whether your fulfillment quotient would be higher, right? So fulfillment in life, that's what matters. Aristotle, when he wrote the book Ethics, he said, what is the summum bonum of life? What is the highest good of life? And he says, eudaimonia, means fulfillment, flourishing life. So that is precisely, so where you will have the highest amount of fulfillment or satisfaction. And now, it's not as much a question, Rashi, as of either America or India. You can have at both places. You can have even third house in London or Europe or whatever. So the opportunities are opening up, and all you bright, young, energetic, beautiful kids, this is an excellent opportunity. Like, the world is growing, and a lot of action is there. And of course, make sure that America does not suffer decline, because there's a lot of competition now from China, from India also. And in India, by the way, as per Goldman Sachs report, there will be excess of young people of working age, whereas America is aging, China is aging, Japan is aging. There will be a lot of young people, because 65% of Indian population would be below 40 years of age in 2025. 65%, a lot, because majority would be young people, whereas other countries are aging. So demographics are changing, depending on whether we are giving the right kind of training and education to these people so that they become self-dependent and they are able to generate wealth for themselves and for others, or are they going to be dependent on the economy and having this parasitic, slavish kind of notion dependent on government. So things are changing, and when the time comes, you'll be able to make a sound judgment. So
Thank you.
Take it easy.
There's a question.
Yeah, please. So for another 10 minutes we will have questions, then we will have a light snacks, and before 1 you are free.
We'll take one more question of the lady who has been asking. Yeah.
All right.
After this question, we'll have one more question.
Sure. Yeah. Yes, please. Raise your hand.
Well, then last question.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ali Halta. I'm studying computer engineering.
Right.
My question is, what do you think Obama or other leaders in America can learn from India?
Good question. In fact, a book is coming, what America can learn from India. Well, I've been thinking of writing one, but see, a lot. I delivered a talk in Boston called American way of living, how wise, how otherwise. And I said, I have come 10,000 miles on the night of Diwali festival, which is like Christmas, to talk to you, not to tell you how wisely you are living, but how otherwisely you are living, right? Because the President Laughlin of Harvard Club of Cape Cod came and said, Surat, your lecture is in the lunch hour. I said, so? Cancel? He said, no. People have a sumptuous lunch before your lecture, so they go to sleep, you know. So I said, do they snore also? He said, no, they sleep quietly. So I got the sense that they are all lazy bums. So it was a challenge to keep them awake. So, well, America, say for example, is barely 500 years old, right? England is 1,000 years old. India, by the most conservative estimate, is 5,300 years old. Rig Veda was written 5,300 years ago, means roughly speaking 3,000 BC, right? Now, I'm not suggesting old is gold. I'm not saying everything which comes from the past necessarily is good. A lot of garbage comes from the past, but a lot of wisdom also comes from the past. China, for example, have a wonderful civilization. India has a wonderful civilization, much more before European came on the scene. So the way we interact with our minorities, for example, in India, we have the largest number of mosques. Mosque means religious temples for Muslims. Largest number of mosques in the world are where? In India. Not in Pakistan, not in Saudi Arabia, not in any other of countries. Largest number, 300,000 in India. Largest number of Muslims after Indonesia are also in India, more than in Pakistan itself. So this tolerance, you know, for difference in the real sense of the word. I don't know what is your experience, but you will also notice that by and large, Indians are very warm-hearted, friendly people. You know, I have been to England. I was going through Heathrow Airport. I was happy. So the guard over there said, "Oh, you have started drinking since morning." It means if you are happy, they think you are drunk. What kind of notion is this? It means looking gloomy and sad is a normal state of affair. I mean, a person may be happy just so they don't understand. Happy without reason. So this taking your duty too seriously, you know, taking moral responsibility too seriously, all this. Sex is the original sin, does not came from India, right? And in India, sex used to be celebrated. Of course, not the way these days we are having all these complaints and all that. There's no celebration. That's really following some wrong order. So, India had this very balanced culture. Say for example, now let me take one thing from Vedas. Ayam nijay paroveti ganana lagu chetsam udar charitanam tu vasudhaiv kutumbakam. Meaning thereby, this is yours, this is mine. These kind of distinctions are made by petty-minded people. This is yours, this is mine. These kind of distinctions are made by petty-minded people, by mean-spirited people. Udar charitanam tu vasudhaiv kutumbakam. For a truly liberal person, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, the whole world is your family. That was 5,000 years ago. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. And in the morning, you know how we pray, Hindus? Sarve bhavantu sukhine, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashantu, makaschituk bhav bhavits. Sanskrit, Vedas, sarve bhavantu sukhine. Everybody should be happy. It does not say I should be happy. Right? It says, Sarve bhavantu, sarve means sab, everybody, all. Sarve bhavantu sukhine, let everybody be happy. We are praying to God. Sarve santu niramaya, let everybody should be free from sickness, illness or whatever. Sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashantu, let me see all people in good condition. I want to see all people in good condition. Right? Sarve bhavantu sukhine, sarve santu niramaya, Sarve bhadrani pashantu, ma kaschituk bhav bhavit. Let me not see people suffering from misery. Right? What is sentiment? So this is what America can learn. Because America is too much into what is in it for me, what is in it for me, till you get really sick that have patience. You know, you will be taken care of. What a narrow way of looking life. You know. And what are the veritable values which are since last 5,000 years are still unchangeable, though contents may change. But the basic respect, mutual respect for each other, human dignity, right? Of course, India has this problem, and we have declined, and a lot of things needs to be improved, like status of women at the moment should be the top priority. So many others, but it's a great culture. So a lot of things can be learned. One is mutual respect, tolerance, friendship for all, fellowship, not being too much caught up by narrow sectarian religion of any kind. You know, because that's why Hindu religion is not a religion in that sense. You can believe in God, you are Hindu. You can not believe in God, you are Hindu. You worship temples, you are Hindu. You worship idols, you are Hindu. You don't worship anybody, you are Hindu. Right? It's almost too vague that you can interpret it any way you like. So it's like really democratic in that sense. You can have as many gods you like, not one. You can have 330 million gods. You know, every day you can changing your god. That may be confusion, too much flexibility, anarchy, but that freedom is there. So in a sense, all these cultures show that human beings should not take themselves too seriously. Right? American, before that, English were taking themselves too, oh, we are the Englishmen, so what a big deal, Englishmen, right? When Englishmen, like for example, Lord Macaulay, when he started education in India in 1835, his education minute are there in England, Oxford, Bodleian Library, I was reading, and he says, now the question comes, what kind of education we should provide to the natives? Natives means Indian. Of course, they can't be taught in their own culture. Why not? Because it's the European culture we rule the world, okay, since when? Last 500 years only. And particularly the English education, the crown of human civilization, very good. Crown of human civilization. We were building wonderful temples and all that. English were jumping from one branch of tree to the another like monkeys. Right? That's the highest civilization. Right? When, just imagine this, let me take America. Harvard is the oldest university in America. Harvard College was built when? 1636. When? 1636. Imagine what was there at that time in India. Taj Mahal was being built. Taj Mahal was built in 1632. Now you compare Taj Mahal. Have you seen Taj Mahal? Not yet.
On the 18th.
Huh?
On the 18th.
So go and a tiny little college in Cambridge, Harvard, where only 500 books were there at the time, and where John Harvard contributed his entire books, and that was his contribution. Perhaps the biggest investment ever made by human beings, because today Harvard worth is about $36 billion, if not more, right? More than entire national education budget of India. So, that is what. So, a tiny little college, America, and a big palatial Taj Mahal, 1636. When English came to India, 1615, Sir Thomas Roe, the GDP of India was 10 times more than the richest European state, that is Louis XIV. Right? 10 times more. Right? Of course. And the world trade was 24%. India. China 25%. So China and India put together were controlling 50% of the whole world trade at the time, 15, right? Now, barely after 150 years, Industrial Revolution, 1750, things were equal. In 1.5 years more, 300 years later, India's world trade 4%. English, of course, many times more, and India GDP 1% of Great Britain. So things keep on changing. So this entire story of Europe is only 500 years story. And the human being existed before, English came on the scene. It reminds me, one American was traveling Oxford. And, in America, Civil War is a kind of a very important date, 1860. He was from South. He kept on asking, is this college prior to Civil War or post-Civil War? So the guy kept on saying, it was much more before that. Balliol College, 1285. UNIF, where Bill Clinton went, 1245. So they came to my college, that is new college. Now it's a new college, so somebody would imagine new means fairly new, 100 years old one. So he said, this American, oh, new college, it must be definitely post-Civil War. The guide who was telling got really irritated. He said, shut up, it's pre-American, 1379. Right? 1379, that college. It was the 7th oldest college, 6 colleges were prior to that. So, lot of things. There were a lot of culture, lot of science, lot of wonderful things in the world before English or American came on the scene. So, answer is you can learn a lot. And in fact, the future is not of one part teaching the other. Future is shared learning. You know, where you will learn something from India and something India will learn from you. And how do you recognize whether a country or civilization is progressing or declining? If you have more students, that country or civilization will progress. If you have less students and stop learning, that will decline. Because the entire human civilization, if you see the cycle, there are 3 stages. You learn, you achieve, you become arrogant, you become ignorant, and you decline. So learn, achieve, ambition, arrogance, then becomes arrogant and decline. So the challenge is eternal learning. Eternal learning is the price of eternal progress. Yes? Okay. Yeah,
last
some question
lady
was there. Yeah, yeah.
I'm Chantel.
Yes.
My major is political science and I'm also pre-law.
Right.
I just have a small question.
Yes.
Out of all the cases that you've won,
Right.
which one do you feel has had the greatest social justice impact on India or the area that you were practicing in at the time?
Well, you would laugh at it. It was a lady whose daughter, a lady came to me that my daughter, 17 years old, is missing since last 3 days. I went to the police. Police is not doing anything. Can you get my daughter recovered? So I called the police officer. I said, look, this woman got a complaint registered. Her young daughter is missing. So why you are not taking steps? He said, sir, I am busy with so many things. Do you think I am sitting for his daughter only? So I filed a case in Delhi High Court. What do you call subpoena? Got issued to the Commissioner of Police. And this SHO within 1 week produced that daughter from some outside state, like from Delhi to Bihar, which is pretty far. And the daughter came in the court, and the mother obviously was relieved. When the mother came out of the court, she touched my feet. I think that was the biggest satisfaction. I did not charge anything, but that was the biggest satisfaction in terms of, you know, professional thing that mother and daughter could be united. 30% cases I do for free, what we call pro bono. 70%, no concession, highly charged. But 30%, those who are weak, widow, or otherwise needy, or some gross injustice, I do 3 kind of cases, where important questions of law are involved, which is much more like intellectual challenge, like Narasimha Rao bribery case. Like I recently did a case on restraint on media, because in media in India, there's a trial by media. Court cases going on, and media, TV people, 24 hours, 7 days a week, they keep on saying he is guilty, he is not. That's what the courts are for. So media trial, say no, that should not be done. I'm all in favor of free media, but responsible media. So evolving norms for media, I filed, and 5 judges of Supreme Court decided on that. So that gives a lot of satisfaction too. But 30% cases pro bono. The rest of that, highly charged. On the whole, you know, it gives a lot of satisfaction when justice is done. You know, you utilize the law to get justice.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In fact, I enjoyed meeting you all, and I wish you all the very best for your careers and wonderful stay in India. I have given this brochure so that you are able to keep in touch whenever there is any question or something. Now, we are friends forever.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will request Professor Vishal Gupta to say a few words. Professor Vishal Gupta.
Thank you. Actually, I thought of a different track. Instead of me saying a few words, I figured I would call upon a student to say a few words, and I'm going to call upon one of my favorite students, Sammy, to say a few words.
I just wanted to say that it's been such a pleasure to learn more about Dr. Singh and about Obama and India and America. And what really struck me is that as we're learning about Obama in India, the fact that although America and India are thousands of miles apart and we have our own cultures, we're really so similar and so connected. And that it's really important for all of us, I think, to look beyond our countries to learn from each other, just as our leaders did, whether it's Obama or Gandhi or Dr. Singh. And that, I think, takeaway is that it's important for all of us to strive for greatness and learn from these qualities that Dr. Singh talked about, and that we all have the potential to be great, and hopefully in the future we will succeed and excel based on what we learned today. So thank you so much.
Good word, Sammy. Usually at the end of these talks, we professors, stand up and give a token of appreciation to the speakers. But today I thought, why the professors? And so I figured, we'll call upon students to give token of appreciation to the speakers. So we'll start with Dr. Singh, and I will ask Kanika to step up and give a small token of appreciation to Dr. Singh. Benjamin, can you please help her? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, just the whole bag.
You are very generous. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Next, I'll ask Emily to give a small token of appreciation to Mr. Jaideep Singh. Thank you very much for hosting us today and arranging all these things for us. Thank you. Mr. Singh also mentioned that there are two associates who helped a lot with the arrangements today, and I will call upon Jeremy to come up here and give a small token of appreciation to our friends who hosted us today. Spencer, for the last one. Jeremy brought both the bags, so you'll have to just come on.
Thank you very much. After this, we have snacks available here. We'll please join us for the snacks. And before that, also, we'll have a group photograph, so that, as what Dr. Singh said, we are friends. We shall remain in our memory. So all the very best, and I'm sure you will have a wonderful stay and stint in India. God bless you. Great. We'll be having a group photograph outside, so we have made some arrangements there itself. Please escort them to that place. Thank you.
Okay, I need to go and sit.
Wait, sir, wait.
I need to go and sit over there. So who will take the picture? Paida, आप आएंगे?
Wait, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ready. Wait, sir. Wait. One more. Yeah. Yes, ready. Yeah, one more, sir.
Surendra, come in.
Please come.
Please come.
Yes, that's great. Yes. Like this then.
Yeah.
Squinch, guys, squinch.
Yeah. Yes, ready. Yes, ready. One more. Wait. Yeah, one more, the last one. Yes, ready. Yes, ready. Wait. One more. Yeah. Yes, ready. Thank you.
आप लीजिए, हो लीजिए. देखो ले लीजिए. A few with this.
Yeah. Yes, ready. One more, last one. Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Sir. One more, sir. Sir. Thank you.
Email is there, so you can spelling of president is wrong. Somebody was forbidden.
Thank you.
Oh.
Stay away from fire. Show me the word. But if you are accused of corruption, look at his intention. Look at his intention. He says, if I get accused of corruption, this is what he says.
No, then I call you.
So, if I get arrested, you're not going to me first, right?
You don't get arrested in India. But if you do call me, have I given the card?
The ketchup will go with the samosa. Okay. And the pickle will go with.
That's the that you ordered that
What?
Yeah. How funny is that?
Oh, what are these? How much drop we put on the video camera?
What's the success story?
I wasn't expecting that. That's
Yeah.
I do biomedical experience, so I want to do systems within the body. So working in sort of like a research facility, working directly with the doctors and the patients, trying to figure out what the